Hi everyone, this is Allan McKay and welcome to episode 16. This episode I'm going to talk about a lot of the lessons I've learned over 2014 as well as some failures I've had as well. I'm also going to be talking about some really vital information to apply to your career and to your success in this year in 2015 as we move forward in applying your long-term goals and actually taking action and making them happen. So I'm going to give some really good information about this. Let's get in there, guys.
Welcome to the Allan McKay Podcast. Allan is an Emmy Award-winning visual effects artist and mentor to many leading industry experts. Listen in as Allan talks with other industry leaders in film, video games, and visual effects about their experience, lessons, and methodology. Allan will teach you pivotal advice to fast-track your career, better your skills, and reach your ultimate dream job. Check out the latest episodes on allanmckay.com.
So first of all, it's now January, so we've just gone through the new year, and I just wanted to wish everyone Happy New Year. Obviously, December was our month. We've focused a lot of content specifically on building our career and preparing ourselves for 2015. So now I want you to reflect on everything you've learned, and if there's any episodes you've missed, I advise you to go back and do them. And even if you already have, it's worth going through and recapping, relearning, and just soaking up every bit of information you can so you can begin to apply it now that we're into 2015. So that is what this episode is going to be definitely focusing on, is the final piece of the puzzle, I hope. Obviously, there's lots more to come, but I think it's very valuable to take all the information we've focused into December and this episode to really begin to push and plan our entire plan of attack for this year. I hope everyone had a great Christmas or holiday, New Year. I kept mine pretty chill. I spent it with my girlfriend just at home and didn't really do any partying or anything too crazy. A good friend of mine, Rob Needhorst, who's quite well known in the nuke compositing circuit, and he's a VFX supervisor. He's worked at DD, many other places. I spent it with New Year's Eve with him and his wife playing board games, which was pretty fun and simple. Definitely a bit of a change to my usual party self, so I enjoyed that. And I was lucky enough that my girlfriend, who is a designer, actually came up with a wrap, basically I've got like a MAME arcade, and that was something I bought last year as a bit of a gift to myself for having such a great year, and she ended up surprising me decorating the entire thing. She was asking what my favorite game was, which I mentioned Doom, just because I kind of started on Doom, doing graphics and replacing a lot of the artwork and stuff for fun, learning a lot of this stuff back in the early 90s, so creating PCX images of all the characters and everything else. So she actually decorated the entire cabinet for me in a Doom theme, which was just freaking cool. I loved it. And so that was really great. This is like a big surprise. I didn't expect it at all. Now, if I sound weak at any point during this or disorientated, I'm actually doing a juice cleanse with my girlfriend this week just for fun, just to start the year out. And this has been interesting. I think we both equally hate it as much as each other. So we've been fantasizing about food and talking about food all night long. So yeah, it's been quite torturous, and I'm looking forward to next week when it's all over and I can go back to eating steaks and having a life again. So now, one thing I wanted to go over briefly, and I think that it's very important for everyone when you do finish a new year to actually look back at what you accomplished as well as your failures too, and just kind of go through what you learned this year, what you gained from it, what were your goals, and what ones did you achieve. What were the sticking points, the areas that you could have done better, or things kind of went a bit haywire, didn't turn out how you quite expected them to. I think it's great to kind of do a year in review and a year, planning ahead, so that way when you do start out in the next year, you have a goal, you have a direction, a vector, as I've always said, and you can begin to measure your year, and towards the end, look back again as to, okay, what were my goals? What did I accomplish? What changed? What were the sticking points? Why didn't I hit my goals? More importantly, I think that typically most goals change throughout the year, so I always break it down more in towards like dynamically changing my goals as I go, just because obviously new opportunities come up, other things happen. We're always changing. So sticking to a long-term goal that maybe the situation changes down the line, it's best to go with the flow, roll with the punches, rather than saying, okay, I'm going to turn this opportunity down because it's not in my scope. So it's always good to adapt, but you need to prioritize, you need to validate what you're doing. Now, I mention all this because 2014 for me was definitely an interesting year. For one, typically I work about 20 or so projects a year. Usually I've got 2 to 3 going on. 2013, I did probably about 30 projects, and a lot of them were feature films. It was a brutal year. And the year before that was pretty similar as well. And there's actually an episode I want to do later on about health, because that was definitely a year that completely changed my life in terms of both how I see work and value work, as well as just permanently how I've affected my health through working too much. So that to me has definitely been, it was a big changer. Now, 2014 for me, I only did 2 projects in terms of 2 productions, and that is highly irregular. Originally, and actually this is a good point to do with setting goals. Originally at the very beginning of the year, I was working on Denzel Washington's new movie, The Equalizer, and I worked on that till I think it was March 3rd. And that's when I switched gears and I started working for Blur Studio, who I hadn't worked for in about 10 years. And it was really great to come back and work with them. And I was working on one of the biggest productions they've ever had, which was Halo. Okay, so I worked on the cinematics for the 10th anniversary, which was a lot of fun because it was rebuilding all of the cinematics for the original Halo 2 game, and obviously upping the quality, the resolution, the entire production value. So that was really great. It was great to be part of such a massive team of people and to experience such a big project. So for me to come back for this project, I'd had plenty of opportunities in the past that for me just were not the right timing. And with this one, it was the right project, it was the right timing, and it was great to go back and experience that. Now, at the same time, it was interesting because it's been a long time. I've only really ever experienced burnout once in my entire career, and this was the second time ever where I could tell very early on that all the years without having much more than maybe a weekend or 2 here and there of a break in between projects, I could tell it was catching up with me. And that to me is something that in the past I've always just soldiered on. I've always kind of looked at things like, okay, well, just get it done and then relax afterwards. And it's never the case. I always say, okay, just get through this and then promise yourself a few, weeks off or something at the very end of it. And obviously at the very end, something else comes up. And, I remember in 2006 killing myself for the E3 rush, getting through, I think it was like 6 projects all at the same time for E3, promising myself, okay, when this is done, have a month off. And that was my incentive to keep going. And I remember literally on the final day of that, I got a call from Frantic Films, which is now part of Prime Focus. And I got a call from one of the owners, and they're like, hey, Allan, I was in Australia at the time. They're like, can you be in Los Angeles by morning? So it was one of those like, okay, get on a plane and go right into the next brutal onslaught of projects where I had to work on the entire new 2-minute intro, skeleton crew of people, 2 minutes all CG, the entire opening with I think it was 2.5-3 weeks to do it all in. And it was just, again, going right back into it. And if you keep telling yourself you're going to take a break, you're going to take a break, it never ever ends. So for me with this project, it was the first time where I actually identified very early on that I actually was beginning to burn out. And I could see down the line that towards the end, am I going to make it through to the end? And also, is health going to be another thing? Because again, 2012 was where during God of War, I severely screwed my spine up and should have been hospitalized, and stupidly kept going through it. I just decided, okay, I'm just going to keep working. I've got to deliver this. I've got clients waiting for me. I've got a team of people I've got to manage. A lot of the visual effects I was doing myself. So I was sleeping at the office, and I was in excruciating pain 24/7 for about 2 months. And it was bad enough that I would have meetings coming up with the director like a week away, and I would be really just baffled how I would actually be able to get into a taxi to go to the meeting. Like a week before that, I'd be worried about that day and trying to think about, should I cancel? What should I do? Because I could not physically leave the office or do anything other than stand. And it turned out I had 2 herniations, like large herniations in my spine, and that took me about a year to recover from. And that was something that definitely changed my perspective on health, on work, on everything. And for me now, health comes first. That's my whole aspect of this or outlook. And I will be doing a big talk about this. There's a few people I want to talk to about this down the line, because that was a big learning experience for me, that you always think, okay, I'll worry about my health later. I got to get through this deadline. I got to get my work done. When this is all done, I'll worry about that stuff later. And what I've learned is, if your health goes, your work goes with it. So you might put off going to the hospital to, spend $1,000 or, whatever it's going to be on an operation or whatever you need. And you think that it's because it's too expensive or you've got stuff to do. You end up losing about 2 months of work because you cannot physically work. I mean, the trade-off is always like that. So for me, that was definitely a big learning curve. And for me, this year, kind of noticing the burnout, it wasn't necessarily as much a physical thing as it was a mental thing. But second time in my life, I could tell it was coming. And for me, it meant that, okay, when this project's done, and I've never ever in my life ever pulled out of a project, but this was one where I actually was considering midway through pulling out. I've never done that in my life. Like, I've been in some really bad work situations, like as in blatantly, early in my career being taken advantage of, working 150-hour weeks, sleeping maybe 4 or 10 hours that entire week. And even in those situations, it meant to me, okay, I'm just going to get my job done, and then I won't work with this studio ever again, and just kind of value my time and my health on the next one. And this is the first one where it was more just to do with everything leading up to it, that halfway through I actually considered pulling out, just to have a chance to get my shit in order, basically, because I could feel early on that I was going to be burning out, and towards the end I was really kind of at that point of burnout. And yeah, I've never experienced that before. I actually did talk to them about, what would be the repercussions, like how bad would it be for you if I did pull out, because my health is suffering. I'm not really, able to mentally just kind of keep pushing forward. I need a break. And this is more to do with all the other projects back to back leading up to it. Like I said, doing 20, 30 productions a year without a break. So that was really interesting. As it turned out, it just was not really a feasible option. So, I stuck through it, I got through it, and that was it. Like, I didn't take a break, but I actually spent the rest of the year working on various other priorities of mine that I felt were much more important than doing production work. So this has definitely been such a different year for me than any other year I've ever had before. Previous years, it's all about production, and this year, I ended up, after finishing up on Halo, I'd been working the entire year on a technical director course. And in my opinion, it's the first real one out there, especially for what I was covering. No one else has really covered this before. And I went into Python scripting, I went into writing MaxScript, writing effects tools, automating a lot of your pipeline process, building a studio pipeline, building tools for everything, so that way you automate 99% of what you do, and the rest of the work that you do is all specifically tied to you as an artist, not you doing all the remedial work, all the grunt work that you typically need to do, like render output paths, make folders, do all that stuff. So that was something interesting, and it was a bit of a gamble to spend so much time on it. But I launched that and it was a massive success, and it's probably been my proudest moment, leading up to it, to have launched that and to have met so many great artists and work with them throughout the course and to interact with them. Since then, I just over Christmas launched an Effects TD training course, Effects TD Transformation, so Technical Director Transformation. And again, this one was more specifically tailored to effects. And this is an 8-month course that I announced end of December. Actually, a 1 week to sign up, which was ridiculous, because typically, you look at most places who do courses, it's about 2 months lead up. I had a week from announcing it to when we started, and again, even bigger. It was amazing, and this is my proudest project that I've put together, and I've put my heart and soul into it. And there were months of leading up to that, like putting all my time in since Halo, which was about June, till now, working on it. So for me, it was definitely a change of pace, working on 2 really high-end, high-tier, high-performance courses that were aimed at like premium quality, at like 6 months to 8 months of high-end material, working with a lot of people who are in the industry, working at ILM, a couple of other really big studios, Ubisoft, a few other ones that are really, really awesome. So it's been great. Like, I cannot be happier about that. And in the meantime, I also ran a few other courses. So I did a destruction course for Max and a destruction course for Maya, doing, demolition, pyrotechnics, dynamics, all that sort of thing. So there's definitely been a lot of great stuff. At the same time, this year's been a bit about reorganizing and reprioritizing. And for me, one of the biggest things that I'm really thrilled about was launching this podcast. I am over the moon. I never expected it to be so widely received, and I'm so proud to get to interact with a lot of you. I'm still catching up on email and a lot of comments and messages. So if you haven't heard from me yet, you will. But it's been amazing. And going to Autodesk University to speak this year about positioning yourself as an authority and building your career more on the higher tier side if you want to take your career to the next level. That was really amazing. I got to hang out with buddies of mine like Neil Blevins and a lot of the guys at Autodesk. Just overall, like seeing Chris Bond from ThinkBox, a lot of other really cool guys. It was great. I really enjoyed that. I got to do a lot and experience a lot there. And yeah, it was just a good way to kind of end the year, to go to Vegas and hang out with a lot of really close friends of mine and get to party a bit and have a lot of fun. So to me, like I said, those were definitely some of the big things that I got to do and I got to acknowledge, and I'm happy to at least be able to identify certain things that have happened in my, previously in my career, and learn from those experiences. So in some cases, having the situations of like identifying burnout, and for once in my life, not seeing that as necessarily being a, soldier on, but actually, really look at it like, look, health comes first. And that's one thing. Again, I really love Blur and everything they stand for, but that was one thing for me, was kind of communicating that I was booked on another project after that, Assassin's Creed, and communicating to them, I wanted to take a break. I need a break. And, at the time in our discussions, it was actually like, okay, well, what if you have, a long weekend because it's Thanksgiving coming up, and then come back to it? And it's like, no. I need a break, as in I'm taking a few months off, and I'm not booking myself on anything for this foreseeable future. And I'm proud that I actually stuck to that. So that to me was definitely a bit of a learning experience to actually do that. Now, at the same time, like the biggest, really big learning experience I had was actually prioritizing the what is actually vital to my career, to my choices, and learning to say no to a lot of things too. So there's been a lot of really amazing projects that I either had on my calendar or tentatively had on my calendar for last year that I had to turn down, even for this year too. So a lot of them I still can't mention, but there were some really cool ones. I was going to VFX soup an entire feature film, and that was on the production side. So in other words, I would be in charge of all the visual effects vendors and doing the entire production, not really being on the box. So that to me was something I was really psyched about. And at the same time, I knew that it was going to conflict with me taking this break to get my shit together. And so that was something in the end I had to step away from. Now there's other ones like Smashing Pumpkins making their big comeback. I was asked to come on and help out with that, doing their latest music video, as well as a couple other really, really cool projects that, yeah, I just had to kind of step away and say no to. At the same time, were a few that I really had said yes to, and kind of getting to that moment of burnout, I realized I got to step away from, and that to me was very difficult too, to actually pull out. And that is kind of, for me, if I look at failure this year, that was a big thing for me. Was I actually had made some commitments this year, and again, I've never done this in my entire career, but I actually had to make the decision to stop a few of them, or to pull out of a few of them. And these were more smaller ones, but they were still big to me because I'd given my word that I would be a part of these. So that that to me is definitely something that's a bit heartbreaking for me, that I needed to pull out and not to see those through. At the same time, you need to kind of evaluate what is more important. If it's health, if it's other priorities. One of the big things for me was definitely overcommitting. I took on way too much stuff. I, at any given time, had, even when I was on Halo, which I was doing pretty big hours, working late nights, coming in at 5 a.m. till midnight at night some nights. Again, that's just part of production. That's what you go through a lot of deadlines. But at the same time, I was juggling other projects. I was juggling other things that I had coming up, as well as my course on technical director transformation. So that was definitely a big one for me, was just realizing I had overcommitted. And the thing is, it's easy to say yes to a lot of things. And Richard Branson actually says, and I'm paraphrasing here, but say yes to everything and you'll notice you'll start to be successful, that you'll get a lot more opportunities. And that's something for me I've actually kind of got to say I completely disagree with at this point, because I think initially getting out of your comfort zone, I always say you got to be in it to win it. And that is that, start saying yes, start just doing it. Then you're actually going to start having opportunities open up to you. The more you say yes, the more opportunities you'll get. Now, there is a point in your career where you're going to start getting a lot of opportunities, like a ridiculous amount. And if you start saying yes to everything, you're not actually going to have all these great opportunities. What's actually going to happen is you're going to become so overwhelmed that not only is one being affected, but everything begins to be affected. And it's kind of like running 10 marathons at once. If you do that, you're going to be doing all these, you're going to be participating in them, but you're probably not going to actually finish any of them. And that's, again, where I kind of felt like in my year where I started having to say no to a few things and pull out of them, was because I had, especially in November and December, that moment where I realized that I was completely overwhelmed. And if I was to continue doing this, that everything that I'm doing would suffer. So I had to make the decision that, okay, what can I remove that would be the least damaging, that would allow me to get everything else back up to 100%. So there were 2 or 3 things I had to say no to, I had to actually pull out of. And that was really heartbreaking for me to actually stop. Now, there were people that I kind of felt like I was let down just by having to pull out of that commitment. And again, never ever have I done that. But it was either that, or it meant that I literally cannot get anything done. Everything that I do will suffer. And it means that everything will start to fail, rather than fail at 1 or 2 things and get the other 10 or 15 over succeeding in those. So that to me is probably the most vital takeaway I've had for this year, was to the power of saying no. And there's actually a book by James Altucher, which I've bought and I'm about to start reading because it came to mind, just because I realize now that you need to selectively say no to certain things, so that way you can achieve more results, to achieve more success. So evaluating what is going to be the best for you, that's going to make the biggest impact. There's the whole 80-20 analysis, which is that 20% of everything that you're doing is going to return 80% of those results. And so at the same time, I can look at that and say, okay, well, these are the key things that have actually made the biggest impact in my career or in my life, or what I'm doing right now. These are the most important that will have the biggest return. And that doesn't necessarily need to be financially. It can be something that can happen, more to do with your career, to do with your passions, to do with your relationships. But you need to evaluate and identify those, so that way you can look at the others and say, okay, well, if I remove those and focus on these, then I'm going to get 80% of my return. And that's a way bigger impact. So identifying those and removing the other distractions, I think, is very key. And this has definitely been a bit of a tangent, obviously, but I think that, at least for me, I mean, I love to hear what people have learned from any production or any mistake. And for me, this has definitely been a big life changer. So that is probably my biggest takeaway, is just learning to not say yes to everything, because in the end, everything will suffer. And at the same time, saying no to certain things is definitely going to give you more power to focus on what you're doing. Also, saying no to things, like, most people are afraid if they say no, that person's not going to want to work with them again, or something like that. One thing hopefully you guys have learned a lot from is the fact that saying no, or saying that you don't necessarily need anything from someone at that point, as long as you do it the right way, leaves open a relationship that you can build on later on. So typically, and this is more of a psychological thing, but if someone goes to you and they reach out to, let's say, hire you, and if you were to say, look, I'd love to work with you, unfortunately right now I'm really busy and I can't find the time to schedule you in, however, I definitely would love to work with you down the line, so please do keep me in mind if anything else comes up. Saying something like that means that you're being very genuine about your rejection. It's basically saying, look, I can't do it, no harm, no foul. People are busy. That's not your fault or their fault. However, the way you do it is very genuine, in terms of saying, look, I really would love to work with you, and if anything comes up, please do keep me in mind. That's being genuine, and it's basically saying, I really want to work with you again. So that does open the door for future, relationships. It also leaves on a good note. The good thing is that typically people go through a screening process, and typically what's going to happen is they're reaching out to you because you're one of a few people that they're considering for a project. So the next time around, if you've already had that back and forth, and in their mind they kind of look at you like, we wanted you, we couldn't get you, it actually makes you pre-qualified the next time around. I found this a lot, and it wasn't like I did it on purpose, but a lot of the times people have come back and said, look, we've been wanting to hire you for a long time and you've never been available. Finally, we've got you. So it's really up to you whether or not you want the job. So kind of by playing hard to get, you end up becoming higher in demand. People kind of mentally take out the do we want you, and what they remember is we wanted you, we couldn't get you. This guy seemed very humble, genuine, very approachable. We want to get him next time around. So it kind of puts you in a different ballpark. You kind of establish that relationship, and by doing it the right way, you've kind of pre-screened yourself and pre-qualified yourself, so the next time around you've got that upper hand, you've got that advantage. You're not in the pool with everyone else being considered. So I think that's a pretty valuable thing, and it's something that I do want you to be aware of, is that you don't necessarily need to worry about, like, if I say no, then they're going to feel like, they're rejecting me, pushing me away, they're too good for me, or whatever you think is going to happen. People are busy, and being busy is a good thing. So, like I said, do it the right way, but, I have no problem saying no to people. I make sure I'm very genuine about it. I'm not, I make sure I reply. There's definitely some emails that fall through the cracks, but it's definitely a very important thing for me to build that initial relationship, so that way we can talk about future stuff. So making that initial contact with them, replying, having the decency to do that, but even if it's bad news, just be genuine about that. I'll leave it there for this episode. I just wanted to kind of do a bit of a recap and mention that, this has definitely been a big takeaway for me for this year. And going into 2015, it's meant that I've definitely looked at my year, my schedule very differently. There's actually already been a couple of really big projects that came up that, for me as a kid, were the biggest thing that kind of got me into visual effects in the first place. And I'm kind of on the fence about, agreeing to these because they're a year-long project. But at the same time, it was kind of what got me into 3D in the first place. So, I've got a few of those situations where I could say yes and jump on a lot of very high-profile things, which would, I'm sure, do wonders for my career, but it would eliminate all the other priorities that right now, personally, are bigger for me. And so I'm learning to, instead of just jump on the gun and say yes, 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 I'm actually looking at it like, okay, well, I can say yes to these, or I can say no and keep my schedule open for the things that are important to me. Or the hybrid of that is obviously make that initial connection, talk with them, but then say your schedule and say the only time I can commit is at the very end or at the very beginning, come in as a consultant or an advisor. So, prioritizing and making sure that everything around you is clear, you've got a clear schedule, you've got time to focus on what's important for you. One other thing that I think I've mentioned before, but I want to elaborate on later on, but one kind of process that I work under very strictly is 363. And that's something that I identified about 6 years ago now. And that was basically kind of breaking down how I prioritize my year. And that is something more based on how I have successfully done it for the past decade or so, which was typically I will have periods of my year where I work excessively. And it's about working on the big productions, working on building strong relationships at various studios with various directors, and also about income, trying to maximize my income. So I'll work 20-hour days. I'll kill myself for about 6 months of the year. And then there'll be about 3 months of the year where I force myself strictly to work on what my ultimate goals are, my long-term goals. And that could be working on a short film or writing a book or whatever your long-term goals are. And finally, having time to rest. And this is something that I'll admit, in the more recent years, I haven't been the best at. Definitely in my earlier years, I had no problem taking a few weeks or a month off and flying around the world. And I kind of had a very different lifestyle. But now it's a bit more about being responsible and being a bit more mature about my life and my career and obviously finances and what I'm building towards. But that was definitely a way that I broke things up. Now, it didn't mean that I'm doing 3 months, 6 months, 3 months. I'm actually doing accumulatively about 6 months of killer work where I brutally will just go out at work on as many productions as I can, even simultaneously, to make as much money as I can during that time. But then that essentially is my way of over-committing during the time to then devote 3 months where it is about the big picture. Because we all have stuff that we're like, one day I want to do this, one day I want to do that, and we never get around to it because we keep putting on the back burner. It's not a priority. So by forcing yourself to say, okay, well, 2 weeks at the beginning of the year, then 4 weeks midway through the year, 2 weeks at the very end, and then maybe a final month or whatever, trying to devote accumulatively about 3 months towards a big goal. And now obviously not everyone can do that, but even just making that commitment, even if it's going to be 3 weeks, by having that time to say, okay, well, I'm going to commit to 3 weeks of just learning effects, or I'm going to learn to produce because I want to switch careers to something that I'm more, I want to explore. I've done that. I've directed commercials. I've worked as a producer for a year. I've, worked solely on set, not behind the box, for 2 years. There's been sporadic parts of my career which I've changed and experimented and done other things, and it was always because those were something I wanted to try. Now, finding time to kind of get to that point of making those connections, building your credentials, doing all that stuff is the hard part. And so by forcing yourself, by committing to a set amount of time that you're going to devote to your year is very important. So that way you can say, okay, I'm going to kill myself for 6 months of the year, and it might be 2 months, and then later on 4 months, later on 2 months, or whatever you want to do. My math's off, but you know what I mean, like 2 months, 2 months, 2 months. Then you're going to have made that money that will hopefully fund you to justify taking that time off to focus on the big picture stuff. If you wanted to go work at Pixar and you knew that for you to do that, you would need to make like a short film, or you work on a production that maybe isn't paying as much as your typical job, but you know that it will give you the experience that would help you get towards that goal. Whatever it was or whatever your ultimate goals were, by committing to it, by committing the time to it, to say, okay, this much time this year, I'm going to do that big goal. That is a way to justify it by saying, all right, well, I'm going to kill myself for this much time, and I mightn't get to spend as much time with my family as I should, but we're all under the understanding that I'm going to have this much time off as well. And again, it mightn't be 3 months for you, it might be 3 weeks, or whatever it is, but by devoting that much time to saying, okay, here's the deal, I'm going to not be around as much, I'm going to work really hard, but it's going to fund me to have a bit of time off to rest, and it's also going to have a bit of time off to work on my big goals. And this is to give time to the big picture, to actually work towards something big. And that's the important thing, because we all have that. Yeah, I always wanted to do that, or yeah, I'm kind of working on something, or I want to work on something, I wish I could work on something, and we never have time to do it. I believe I've mentioned a really close friend of mine, Dave Clayton, who is the animation director for Weta, and how he got his job was actually he made a short film. He worked with another, like his best friend, Andrew Silk. The two of them took a couple of months off, I think it was 6 months off, lived on, ramen noodles or whatever, and they worked on Cane Toad, which is a really amazing short film of theirs. And that was a chance for them to actually do something really big and make this short film, which won all these awards. And I think is one of the key things that helped him initially get into Weta. And then his strategy, his success, his brute force work ethic was what moved him up the ladder to become animation supervisor, to animate Golem, to animate King Kong, to move on to Avatar and everything else. Now, those are the sorts of things that are really impactful. Is like, okay, if I were to make a short film that would give me recognition, that would build me towards something really cool and great. So by having that goal and knowing, okay, well, for me to do that, remember we did that kind of reverse deconstruction, basically, a deconstruction of your end goal and how to get there. Okay, well, what if 3 months of the year I devote towards this thing? At the same time, having that time off. Stefan Stagmeister did a really amazing TED Talk where he took a very large portion of his time off, which I think it was about a year. I could be very wrong about that, but taking a large portion of time off to go and travel and relax. He went to Vietnam and all these other places, and you'll see how that actually changed his work. He's a designer in New York, has a design firm out there, and does really amazing work. You can see how it influenced a lot of the work that he's done. Now, that's one example of many, but by having that time off, and now he has introduced that into his company where everyone is required to have a break and to rejuvenate, to detach from their work. And we all have those mini attachments, but having a devoted amount of time to actually step away gives you a chance to look at everything from a bird's eye view, to get altitude essentially, to be able to look at the big picture and see how things fit together. When you're in the trenches, everything kind of all muddles together and you're not really focused on anything but what's in front of you. I always call that having your blinkers on, like horse blinkers in a race. You're focused on the finish line and that's it, rather than looking at the strategy, looking at how things will fit together and what you could do, how to reflect on how you're currently doing things. Now, it's very important, and by having that time away, I think is very crucial. And obviously, we don't usually have that. We kind of put ourselves in a situation where we have a full-time job, we got bills to pay, and you're caught in an endless cycle where you need to just get by. Now, if you were to kill yourself during that time and do the 6 months, which you're kind of working at twice the speed, even taking on freelance work on the side, so that way you've got two incomes, whatever it's going to be, then that's going to be something to allow you to have that money to justify taking a break. Now, it might mean living life a little bit tighter, but it means that long term you're going to have a lot more options and opportunity. Okay, so that's actually an episode I want to do later on, and it's something I'm a little bit on the fence about, just because I'm not sure whether this is something aligned with anyone else's interest. But for me, something I've actually done a lot of this year, which was a big thing, was doing talks on career and finance. So like Neil Strauss is a 7 times New York Times best-selling author. I worked with him on doing a talk or two, and I actually did one at the end of the year for a mastermind group of his on career in finance and marketing and product launches. So that to me was a very, very new ground to cover as something I would actually talk about as an authority, but it's something that I've got a lot of experience in. And that was a lot of fun and really mind-blowing and mind-opening as well to actually do. Now, that's something that I'd like to actually do a talk on here, is actually about getting a passive income. If you wanted to get an extra $1,000 a month, doing stuff online, or finding other ways to generate money outside of doing the typical work for time or money for time mindset. So that is something that, especially if you guys do email me and say, yes, I want to find out how to make more money. That's definitely something that I've had a lot of experience talking with a lot of very high tier, in some cases millionaires, about the subject. So it's been really awesome to do that. And I think that, again, that can fall into the 363 mindset, that you work your butt off, whether it is doing just your daytime job or you have other things that you're working on, but it's all about accumulating income to cover your ultimate goals. Now, I've spent 10 minutes about this, but I think it is a very valuable thing that, ultimately, like I said, you're working towards that big goal to have something, that's going to pay off down the line. So living a little bit tighter now, so that way you have more freedom later. That's what you're ultimately going for. Whether it is, okay, I kill myself now, I build the ultimate reel, and I build the right credentials, and I build the right contacts, the right relationships, so that way I can go work in a country like Canada or London, or, Vancouver, London, where there's a lot more opportunity for work. Whatever it's going to be, you need to have those goals, set them in stone, and then go about having that 6 months where you kill yourself, whatever it's going to be, to generate that money. And then you have that time to go about getting, working on the things that you need in that breakdown that you did, that deconstruction that we all did on our goals, and then having time off to relax. And like I said, it doesn't need to be a 3 months or 3 weeks, and you can break it up throughout the year, but having time to step back. And it's just as important as it is to revitalize yourself, but it also is important to have that time in relationships with family, people you care about. Otherwise, you lose all of that. A lot of that falls to the side because you're so busy. So having time for that, but also having time for yourself, just to take that step back, to plan. Okay, so that's how that falls into the 363 mindset. I think it's very important. So again, there's a lot here just kind of thrown at you, and obviously it's been a long episode, but these are things that are more the crux of how I pretty much organize my lifestyle, and how I've had a pretty successful career has been about having that focus. And for me, I know that I wouldn't be able to justify working crazy hours and doing sometimes very radical things, such as taking 6 months away from production, which I never thought I would ever be able to do. Now, by being able to do that, I can justify it by saying, okay, well, I'm going to work really crazy now to position myself for being able to take time out to focus on these other things. And to myself, be able to commit to it, because I know I would not be able to say, okay, I'm going to take time out of my work and my career to focus on these other things, because right away I would look at my bank account and notice that it's going down, it's not going up. And there's always going to be that margin when you hit it, that you start to worry about, okay, now I'm worried about cash, I need to get back into work mode. So again, careful planning, by having that time to devote, by having the extra income when you're working in those 6 months, can justify kind of having that additional time later on. So that's a very big mindset. Like dealing, with failure is one thing I've mentioned here, and I'm being brutally honest. This is stuff that I've had a very hard time acknowledging to myself, let alone to others, is certain lessons that I've learned this year, and being able to say, yeah, I had to actually cancel some things to be able to get to the finish line successfully with the other 99% that I was focused on, rather than let it all fall apart trying to please everyone, which I think is a very difficult thing to even commit to yourself, or to admit to yourself that you need to do these things. But also with your family and everyone around you, by saying, look, I'm going to do this, and it means that later I'm going to have more time for this, and this. people need to respect your goals and allow you to go after what you're passionate about. So obviously, if you're in a more of a bigger relationship or a marriage or have a family, these are things you need to share and communicate with. And sometimes it actually might be about, okay, we all need to pull together so that way I can then go after this goal, which is going to hopefully leapfrog us into a whole different lifestyle down the line. So all of us working, all pulling together money, living a little bit tighter, this is all going to be for the greater good of all of us by giving me the opportunity to get myself ahead, therefore getting us all ahead. So every situation is different. We all have advantages and disadvantages, but it's about seeing that big picture. A lot of what I've covered this year has been about, December especially has been about building up all of your goals, building up the mindset by having a new way to look at your career, especially gearing up for 2015. You can now start to evaluate what you need to do and where you need to go. But more importantly, you need to make the time to actually make the plan and also to execute the plan. And that is something that, you need to make the time, which is the most difficult part. So typically 3-6-3, 3 months vacation, 6 months utter freaking killing yourself, but generating the income to cover the rest of it. 3 months of focusing on your big plan, your big picture. Again, those numbers can shift, but that is something that I've successfully executed over the past decade especially. And I've looked at my career and deconstructed that to, okay, what did I do that really made my lifestyle successful in the past couple of years? And it was very consistent. Since then, again, other people I know who are successful that I've kind of shared that mindset with, they've had very similar approaches to how they do things. And it's all about making time for those bigger goals. And it's all about having a break to step away and look at things and realize, you know what, maybe I'm going about things a little bit crazy and I need to reinvent my mindset on this. So these are all things to keep in mind and adapt to your lifestyle, to your career, to your goals. But those are definitely the key takeaways here. Making time and also reevaluating where your time's going, doing the 80-20 analysis, so that way you can figure out what are the 80% that's probably sucking away my success, that's holding me back, and what's the 20% that's actually having the most impact. Okay, so hopefully you gain some from this. Obviously another long episode, but again, just a very massive brain dump of some of the big things that I've learned and I've stood by, especially in 2014, as well as being very honest about some of the other things that I've learned this year that I have to or want to change for 2015. This is definitely going to be a big year for all of us, and it's been so motivating and so inspiring to hear from a lot of you, to get emails, to get all the comments, Facebook messages, everything. It's been so great. And again, feel free to add me to Facebook if you go to facebook.com, Allan F. McKay. So ALLAN for Frank, McKay, MCKAY. So facebook.com/Allan F. McKay. You can add me on there and, be a great way to stay in touch, as well as to get updates on a lot of really great stuff. I'm actually going to be giving away a lot of really cool content very soon to do with your career, as well as a lot of the swipe files that I've been giving away recently. That's something I want to be doing a lot more of too. So there's going to be a lot of cool stuff, and I'll be posting some of that on there, as well as obviously, more importantly, the VIP list, which you guys are getting a lot of exclusive stuff that I probably won't publicly give out anywhere but that location. So that's it for now. Next episode is going to be on branding. This is actually something that I wanted to do in December, and it's just a matter of time that it didn't actually happen. And that is going to be about building your personal brand, building a name for yourself and defining yourself in that niche, so that way people associate you with that brand. And it's the best way to stand out, the best way to get identified and hired for work. So that's going to be a big episode that I'll be releasing very shortly. But in the meantime, think about everything I've gone through here. I really think this is very vital to everyone's career, and I hope you gained a lot from it. Thanks again, and welcome to 2015, guys.